Let's talk to Scott calling in from California. Scott, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Going pretty good.
Since I called last, long time. Thanks, few years.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. Well, welcome back. How can we help?
Yes, sir. So just to let you know, I'm very agnostic when it comes to like ontological claims or metaphysical claims, even from science, right? But I try to understand stuff. And, and I read a lot of stuff, and recently was watching like this really weird YouTube video from Viper TV Science about event ontology. And so I saw that Matthew was on the show, so I was like, yeah, maybe somebody could finally kind of explain this to me, because it seems really kind of strange, and I'll kind of tell you how I understand it, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew. But so there's there's thing ontologies, and then there's event ontology. Thing ontologies are like ontologies that consider the universe to be made up of like a plurality of discrete objects. So it's kind of been traditionally accepted as a basic truth of existence. The universe is made up of things, obviously. But then a change to the traditional thing ontology kind of happened, and it took shape as kind of a description of reality, wherein the fundamental understanding of matter in the universe is not really in three-dimensional space, but in four-dimensional space-time. So in this case, from what I understand, the configuration of matter and energy does not change in time, but it's wholly present in space-time. In other words, everything that there is in space-time simply exists all at once. So existence is not tied to a mode of time, such as only the present, or the present and the past existing and the future not existing, maybe the future becoming as time passes. But the shift from space to space-time kind of rules out in the first place ontologies that sort of tie existence to a specific, mode of time, like presentism. So it kind of has a lot of implications for our understanding of ontological or metaphysical reality, right? So I was just kind of wondering, what were your thoughts on that? Because I don't really understand it 100%. I think I understand what they're saying about this, but it's really intriguing, though.
Unfortunately, this is getting a bit beyond the kind of areas of science that I've looked into. I wish I did know more about it. For me, I do tend to be, I guess, a bit more of like a pragmatist when it comes to these things. A lot of these theories sometimes have a nice mathematical basis for them, or there is some reason why they've been brought up, or theories, hypotheses, till we can to show them. But I'm more worried about how does it manifest to us? How do we experience? Because for me, my goals in science is to try and figure out how this reality works so that we can benefit mankind, we can make our living more comfortable, we can improve technology. And whilst I find the philosophical sides of it, it's like this very interesting, it kind of gets a bit beyond what I've done, unfortunately. I wish I had more for you. But for me, it's more of how do we experience? So if we still experience time, it might be a bit of an illusion. Yeah, as you're saying, there are things that might not line up with our traditional thoughts of it. But how do we use that? What does this mean? And so I'm more thinking about then, how would we test this? How would we know if this is the case? I don't know if you have anything on that. Right. Sorry, I wish I had more.
I'm surprised at how much I was able to follow you, Scott, because I think I understand this concept. This is stuff I've at least read about this before. I think this goes back to, even Einstein was talking about this idea of time being a part of everything around us. It's not just separate. It's part of existence. It's why when we talk about the Big Bang theory, for example, when we talk about, it may not make sense to say that there was a thing before the Big Bang, because time itself is a part of our existence. So it doesn't make sense to say something before time, right? Like I think this is part of that. And I have no idea. I am not qualified at all. I could make any assessments one way or another, but you know,
yeah, I did. I was looking at when I was watching the video and kind of dug into the literature a little bit, looked at some of the books and books on relativity and where all this stuff kind of stems from. And one of the practical solutions that came out of event ontology was GPS. The fact that we can understand how GPS works and stuff like that based on, distance and, from gravity and how all that stuff kind of affects time. Time is kind of malleable.
Yeah, it's literally, this is what Interstellar was about, the movie Interstellar. If you guys ever watched that, like when the astronauts they were on the planet and time was literally moving. Well, it was slower than everywhere else. Yeah, slower than everywhere else. And this was based on at least what I understand to be quote unquote real principles of science. I don't know. I can't check out the math, but there is like some sort of validity to that, right? And you're right with GPS, because when things are orbiting over the Earth, they are actually moving it at a very, very, very small amount of time, like slower than everywhere else on Earth. And it's a weird thing to think about, but we've done a test with atomic clocks and stuff, and we can demonstrate that there is actually a change in time just simply based on what seems to be location in space, which is kind of crazy to think about. So it's also why they talk about when you go at the speed of light, that how you age would be different than everywhere else around you. Fascinating stuff. I'm not nearly qualified to talk about it, so sorry that it seems like Matthew gave it his college try too, but I don't know. I think it's a big whiff from us tonight, Scott. Don't know if we could help you out any more than that.
Well, I thought I'd ask. I'm not much of a big physics guy. I like to read it. I'm really fascinated, especially about the deep stuff like this. I get really fascinated to see how these sort of predictions based on these weird theories, how did they turn out? And GPS was one of them, and everything you're talking about.
And the reason why, I don't know if I clarified earlier, the reason why GPS is specific, and part of that is because if we have a measurable difference in time between what we experience on Earth and one might experience, orbiting the Earth above, then you have to calculate for that difference. So that's another reason why we know, for example, that time is experienced differently, because they have to put that into their calculations when they do GPS coordinates and stuff, at least for the more sophisticated ones. So there you go. That's what I know. Again, this is all pop science, surface level stuff, and I couldn't tell you any more than that.
I just to give you an idea of how difficult it is to do calculations for general relativity, and relativity is one of my favorite topics, but if you wanted to do calculations, you, at least at the university I went to, you would need to spend 4 years studying physics, at least 4 years, before you got to calculations for general relativity. And even then, you're not going to do these full calculations like that. The maths and the theory behind it is super, super hard. But it's really, really cool what you get out of it. And so, the GPS is one really good example. The atomic clocks, you move them, you fly one around the Earth, keep the other one still. You can do the calculations, figure out that one of them has gone through less time than the other one. And because of relativity, one of my favorite kind of little examples of what you could theoretically do with it, though we haven't quite figured out how to practically do it yet, is a warp drive. So a lot of things so if you heard of like Star Trek warp drive, it's potentially possible where instead of traveling from A to B like we do, you bend space around your object. And one of the really cool things I like about that is if you flew using this thing out very, very far from the Earth, you went 66 million light years away with a giant telescope, and you turned around and looked back, you could see the dinosaurs go extinct. So there's all these weird things about how you can mess with time. And
Man.
So yes, I wish I had more on the theory,
Yep.
but
Unfortunately,
relativity is just
we don't have enough time to go into it right now. I think that's all the time we got for this particular call. But Scott, it's good to hear you again. I remember the last time you called in, you also talked about a grand philosophical inquiries. So, keep at it. I appreciate it. And thanks for watching the show.
No problem, man.
Yeah. We'll see you next time. Sorry, I cut him off right there. I didn't mean to. I was trying to get it done beforehand, but we're doing not our typical. I say it's not our typical call screen setup. We've been doing this quarantine setup now for like almost a year now. It's kind of crazy to think about, but anybody who is wondering about that, we don't know yet either. We don't know when we'll go back to the studio space. We'll see. Actually, I may not be in the same space for too much longer either, and we'll talk about that maybe in the future as that comes up. But for now, Scott, do appreciate you calling in about that. But we got some other callers that I want to get to.